Pleasure you could stay on. I am Pious Kojo Backah. Let's now look at our stories. Ghana is set to request a debt relief via the G20 Common Framework Program, despite the fact that the only poor nations are eligible for it. According to Reuters, the country has sought reassurances that the negotiations can be expedited before proceeding. It said Ghana had reached out to the Paris Club of creditor countries in December 2022 to ask for assurances that the common framework process set by the group of 20 leading economies in 2020 in response to COVID-19 could be expedited. If the assurances are favorable, the government would quickly sign onto the common framework. Let's get on Zoom and speak to an economist, Dr. Edu Owusu-Sarkodie, on this issue. Grateful, Dr. Owusu-Sarkodie, you could join us. From where you stand, do you think Ghana has a chance of getting the request of debt relief from the Paris Club of creditor countries under the common framework?
Ghana has a chance. Ghana seems to be the darling boy of the IMF and the World Bank. I listened to an interview of one of the officials who worked on the staff level agreement with Bernard Able, and he indicated that there's a deliberate attempt by them, I mean the IMF, to help Ghana go through the program because of the geopolitical nature where Ghana finds itself. So I believe that, yes, if we are able to negotiate well and talk to them and let them know how difficult things are with us and how we desperately need it for the IMF program, I think that Ghana has a chance. And I've already mentioned to you because we seem to be one of the darling boys of the Bretton Woods institutions. And so it's likely to happen. And if it's successful, we are talking about some $15 billion together with the multilateral. So we have $1.7 billion from China, $1.9 billion from the Paris Club, and $8.3 billion from the multilaterals. If you put all together, you're talking about some $15.4 billion. So that is more than 55% of the total external debt. And so we are just hoping that this works well. And I think that it will be a huge relief to the economy and to all Ghanaians.
And how do you think this move would have an impact on government's ongoing negotiations with the IMF for a program?
As you are all aware, the IMF, when they finished the staff level agreement with the government of Ghana, they indicated that for the board to approve any agreements on the program, there is the need to get an assurance from the creditors. That's the key word here, to get assurance from the creditors. And so we need the IMF. Ghana's economy is in that situation. We need an IMF program. And the IMF is saying that Ghana needs to acquire some, assurance from the creditors. So remember that the government has already started with this domestic debt exchange, which has been met with a number of other, oppositions. And so the government hasn't been able to push its way through from the domestic fund. And so that is why it is requesting for some external debt relief. And this is successful. Even if they get the assurance from the creditors, the IMF program will come on board latest by March this year. And you and I know that we need the IMF program to stabilize things in this country. Prices of items are too high. The exchange rate, thanks be to God, that it's been stabilized now, but we know that it was being fueled by speculations. It's not as if the Ghanaian economy is that, robust, which is giving us this stable exchange rate. And so if you don't get the IMF program to stabilize things, our economy may not be able to get back on track. So we need some of these debt relief, debt restructuring to get the IMF program and then to revive the economy for all of us to be relieved of the hardships, because everybody is crying in this country and around the world that things are difficult. You and I know that things are difficult. Workers are asking for salary increment. The government is not able to meet them. So things are hard everywhere, and we need this debt relief on the IMF program to recover our economy.
All right. So do you hold the view that this move may also delay our quest to quickly get back to the international market?
I'm not sure it will delay our quest to get to the market. If we are successful, it will send a positive signal to also the multilateral debt, which is about 8.3 billion. And then if it's successful, I'm sure the Eurobond market, as you know, Ghana owns about $13.1 billion from the Eurobond market alone. And so if the debt relief program is successful, it may send a good signal to us, because remember that the downgrading, which has caused our inability to access the market, they have indicated that the reason they downgraded us is because Ghana is unable to service its debt. That's a key feature here, unable to service its debt. So if the debt relief comes, the debt GDP ratio will fall to the sustainable level that we are all looking for, about 55%, and then it will give government of Ghana some stability when it comes to the debt GDP ratio. But that is not the only thing. The other key variable would be the debt service to revenue ratio. So in as much as we are aiming for debt relief, if it's successful, we must also be mindful of the debt service to revenue ratio, which is currently around 70%, which is highly unsustainable. In fact, during the HIPIC time, it was 71%. So if currently we are doing 70%, then we are just like the HIPIC times in 2001. And so we need also to mobilize resources domestically to give the assurance to the capital market that Ghana can service its debt before they wholly open the door for us.
All right, so how soon would we see this happen, all things being equal?
Well, as you are aware, many of the G20 countries, members, as I should say, member countries are also members of the Paris Club. And therefore, if during the G20 summit or during these negotiations, Ghana is successful, we are looking at maybe the next 2 months. Roughly, let's hope that everything happens within the first quarter of this year, because we are looking at the IMF program, the full implementation of the IMF program by March this year. So whatever we have to do to get a program by March this year, we have to do it. And so even if they have to hasten negotiations, they have to do it. Whatever the government of Ghana must do to get the IMF program by March, they should do it, because they know, and we all know, that that is our only savior.
So if this money should hit our accounts, where would you say we need to focus our attention to?
We have examples from the HIPIC Relief Initiative in 2001, where under President Kufuor's time, we had the poverty reduction strategy. Now, thanks be to God that the poverty level in Ghana is not too huge, and therefore there will be the need to invest in infrastructure. We know that the roads in Ghana are very bad. The government declared the previous years as years of road, but unfortunately, because of COVID and the war, they could not raise enough revenue to embark on that project. We also know of the Agenda 111. In other words, these are investing in healthcare, making sure that we build hospitals, and not only building, but furnishing the hospitals with healthcare equipment. And then we can turn our attention to railway, then digitization. The digital infrastructure is also key. So if the government concentrates on health, education, road, railway, it will be good for us to develop the country and then transform the economy for the betterment of every Kenyan. But because what we are looking for is employment generation. So whatever investment that the government will use the funds for should necessarily lead to employment generation.
Very well. Thank you very much, Dr. Edu Owusu-Sarkodie, for your time here on the Marketplace. Grateful you could speak to us. A while longer on the economy, and the Bank of Ghana has announced that it will hold its first monetary policy committee meeting for 2023 from Tuesday, January 24 to Friday, January 27 to review developments in the economy. The meeting, which will be held, which of course will be the 110th, is expected to heavily discuss Ghana's high inflation rate, which stands at 50.3%, the highest in 27 years. The following report has more.
There be some extra measures introduced to deal with the current pressure on the Ghana cedi. Well, that's one question that would come up strongly during this first Monetary Policy Committee meeting for this year. This is due to the recent challenge with the local currency we started in December last year. The committee will also not forget about the perennial first quarter pressure on the Ghana cedi, as most businesses demand dollars to restock for the year. Again, what about inflation rate and whether it is indeed going to decline in the coming months, or some extra monetary measures are needed to check liquidity? Most industry watchers would also be looking forward to the end of year numbers for 2022 when it comes to Ghana's total debt stock, the cedi's performance against the US dollar, inflation rate, and whether the Bank of Ghana indeed ended 2022 missing out on most of its key monetary indicators. Also, an update of the IMF program negotiations, as well as the possible board approval for a program, and the almighty debt exchange program and its impact on the entire banking industry.
Let's stay a while longer on the Monetary Policy Committee, and let's go on Zoom and speak to economist Dr. Patrick Esumen for more. Grateful, Dr. Patrick Esumen, you could join us on the marketplace. We do know that inflation as it stands now is 50.3%. Now, there are views that the first Monetary Policy Committee announcement will be very important in sending a signal. Now, do you foresee the committee increasing the policy rate to hold inflation?
Good afternoon and good afternoon to viewers. I think a rate increase is still quite likely, but it will somewhat depend on what the December number, which will be released maybe sometime next week, will be. Don't forget that the last time the committee met in November, soon after that we've seen that inflation has spiked up. The 50.3% reading was after their last meeting. You might think that now the cedi appears to be doing slightly better than the last time they met, but I think the conditions are still fairly volatile. And if you look at the way the committee looks at things, it seems to place a lot more premium on the inflation than the growth. So you expect that when the December inflation number comes, it's not likely to show that inflation has suddenly tapered or is going down. So we really should expect a rate increase.
Well, some people believe that the policy rate hikes have not worked in the last 2 quarters of 2022. Do you agree?
So I think the issue about identifying exactly how the policy rate has worked is a tricky thing. You have cases where the policy rate has increased, but at the same time as they are increasing, you are still seeing more shocks, coming through the economy. So sometimes the full effect of a shock hasn't been seen. So it's not clear whether the inflation or the currency depreciation would have been much worse without the policy rate hike. So it's something that, I've seen the governor try to defend their position and say that, they are seeing signs that the measures were working. But, I mean, overall, it's a very difficult environment to predict how much the policy rate has worked.
I know that you've stated that we are likely to see an increase. Now, if the policy rate is maintained at 24.5%, what kind of signal do you think this will send?
Well, it might send the signal that maybe the Bank of Ghana feels that the worst part of the price increases are behind us. Or that, they've now gotten a handle on, what's coming up. Don't forget that the MPC has at several points indicated that they expect fiscal consolidation to pick up some of the slack in terms of dealing with the challenges of macroeconomic stability. So now that a new budget has been passed, and now that it looks like we are making progress towards the IMF program, they might feel that the fiscal consolidation might handle some of the difficulties that we have had. So if they decide to keep the policy rate unchanged, it might mean that they feel that the other measures that needs to be taken to handle the the economic challenges are coming on board, and therefore the need for policy rate to do more may have subsided. But I mean, if you look at how how the policy the committee has viewed things, and their view about inflation, and it appears that they put so much premium on reining in the inflation. So I won't be surprised at all if you saw an increase.
Dr. Patrick Isumen, for businesses, I'm pretty sure they are optimistic, or they are hoping that the Bank of Ghana will maintain or reduce, which of course you've predicted that is not likely to happen. In this circumstance, how should they prepare themselves? How should they adjust?
I think as for a reduction, it's extremely unlikely. I mean, I would be very surprised if we saw a reduction at this point. I think it's too early. Generally, you expect that central bankers and monetary policy makers are a little bit more conservative and not trigger happy. So when they do a policy, they might want to see the effect, its full effect felt through the economy before they take an action. Don't forget that when the policy changes, according to the governor himself, it takes up to 4 quarters for its full impact to be seen. So if they feel that they've gotten to a point where enough has been done based on the data they are seeing, and that when the cumulative effect of all the recent increments will do enough to fight the inflation, they might decide to stay it. As for businesses, I think overall businesses will probably want to put on hold any major investment that requires financing from the banks, because it's not just the policy rate, but the ongoing discussions about the debt exchange is really going to change the strength and the lending power of the banks. So they are really like to see more tightening financing conditions in 2023. So it's really important for them to plan carefully, and then maybe minimize their planned expansions and the business investment in the meantime.
Grateful, Dr. Patrick Isumen, for your time here on the Marketplace, helping us understand what the Bank of Ghana is likely to do by way of announcement of policy rates in the coming days. We'll certainly monitor that space and keep viewers updated. Now, Dean of the University of Professional Studies Law School, Professor Kofi Abuchi, has maintained that commercial banks may not be immune from any legal action from domestic bondholders under a debt exchange program. It is coming on the back of concerns that the commercial banks that sold these bonds should be made to compensate local investors. Professor Kofi Abuchi has been speaking on the Super Morning Show earlier today.
At this stage, everyone knows that clearly. It may be safer, but it is not altogether as safe. Let's be clear. At least government is talking to you. At least we know we can find government. At least your principal is not really that much in danger. But often there are other investment systems where you can't even find the entity you invested with at all, and therefore I call them the pyramids. The pyramid of the 90s. Where you wake up one fine morning and the company doesn't exist anymore. It's not there. You just vanished, and so you lose everything. So I think it's a safer option. It is not necessarily as safe as we may have assumed. One point about this haircut, which I just need to mention, though, is actually the liability of banks. I haven't heard anybody mention that. It is not just the government's liability, but the liability of banks. Because here's the thing. The instruments of investments that we buy, those are sold to us by banks. The intermediary agencies who operate by way of this sale are agents of banks who stand between us and government. Treasury bills and these bonds, they are sold to us by banks. And here's the thing. The banks don't necessarily come passively. They come actively. In other words, they come selling the instruments. And they give you convincing reasons why you should buy X and not Y. They give you good reasons why if you invest in this, you are likely to get a better return. These banks are therefore active participants in our decisions as to whether to invest in a particular space or the other. What it means is that when there's a liability, the banks will face this. Recently in the US, some football stars and football stars, musicians, and a few other stars were sued for advertising for a certain brand. Now, the reason they were sued was because the consumers complained that they would not have bought those products otherwise, but for the fact that these football stars and high-profile personalities endorsed them. Endorsement has now become a matter of liability. So banks come before you, and they even go beyond endorsement. They actually tell you that you have to, it's good for you. You know, your money is lying dormant and is wasting away, and you have to buy XYZ. And they literally convince you and goad you into getting it. And they help you through the process in making sure that you purchase a particular investment.
So we can take the banks on?
Well, I'm not at this stage telling you what you should do. I'm telling you what there is. That there's a liability issue of banks that nobody's even talking about. And that's what I think the banks should be worried about. And I think it should also shape the dynamic of banker-customer relationship into the future, because the danger of a bank being overly enthusiastic about the investment of its client should potentially raise liability issues. And I think we may be standing on the cusp of a similar scenario. Hopefully this shouldn't happen for the banks, but if it does happen to them, I think they would really have to take some serious lessons moving into the future. I'm just mentioning this because I realize it's one of the, you know, one of the considerations that I haven't literally heard anyone talk about.
You're still watching The Marketplace with me, Pious Kojo Backah. Moving on to some other stories, the Chamber of Petroleum Consumers Ghana has raised concerns over unchanged prices in LPG despite 2 consecutive decreases in petroleum products in the country. Diesel and petrol prices went down by 8% in the last pricing window, which occurred on January 1, 2023. So what could be the reason? Let's get on phone and speak to Executive Secretary of COPEC, Duncan Amwa, for more. Duncan, grateful you could join us on The Marketplace. Now, LPG Marketers Association is saying prices of LPG cannot go down even though prices of petroleum products such as diesel and petrol went down. Now, one of the reasons they say is taxes. What can the consumer do about this, Duncan?
Good afternoon to you and to your viewers. Unfortunately, we are unable to support the LPG market on this one. If you do the numbers that we have for the window, LPG should have seen probably the highest decline in terms of price per kilogram. We should have probably been around 20% per window. Whilst we share in the earlier concern raised that indeed the taxes on LPG would need to be reduced or scaled down, we don't think that is enough justification at this point for them to decide that they are not going to reduce prices of LPG at the local pumps. And so we'll try to engage them forthwith to ensure that what is due the consumer now is not denied him simply because of the call for taxes to be reduced on LPG. We think that that call is in the right direction, but immediately the declines that we've seen on the international market together with a relatively stable local currency necessarily leaves us at a position where LPG prices per kilogram at the local pumps would need to come down, and that we demand immediately.
Interesting to hear you stay in that position. Now, is it possible to see such price fall in some petroleum prices, but see an important product like LPG stay unchanged? What may cause this, if you don't believe taxes are enough?
Well, I wish we had gotten to engage them before this communication public. Whatever their challenges are, we'll probably need to hear them out. But we are still of the strongest conviction that cool heads will prevail, and that users of LPG will be given the needed respite following from decline in international market benchmark, and then again a relatively stable local currency. And so whatever their excuses may be, we don't think we can subscribe to those excuses at this point. We think that per the numbers they are supposed to go down, if you can't even do all 20, you could do about 10, 15, and possibly we can have a conversation thereafter. But any such excuses, I can confirm, will be countenanced, and we expect that prices will decline just like prices for petrol, diesel has gone down for most of the oil marketing companies. We don't expect LPGMC to do contrary, and that will be engaging them shortly.
And shortly say, okay, I was about asking how soon that would be. But what kind of signal do you think this will send to consumers, particularly now that government is advocating the usage of LPG to stop the use of charcoal?
Indeed, government owes the people an obligation to ensure the availability and affordability of the product. And so when the LPG marketers, together with our chamber, calls for reduction in prices, especially the tax component of LPG prices, we are mindful of the environmental impact that the alternative fuel sources such as charcoal has on the Ghanaian environment. And so we expect government to do more by lowering the taxes on LPG in order to make it affordable to most Ghanaians, especially in the rural communities.
Thank you.
That they would choose that over the use of firewood.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Duncan Amwa, for your time here on the Marketplace, speaking to us on the back of the LPG reduction by way of prices. And that's it for the Marketplace. I am Pious Kojo Backah. For more news, log on to myjoyonline.com/business. Grateful serving you. Do enjoy the rest of our programs. Bye-bye.